and go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Um, my name is John Burbridge, and give you a little background on myself. I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I was born in 1940. And I probably saw my first organized baseball game in either 47 or 48, and that was the Jersey City Giants in the International League. And the Orioles were part of that International League at that time. In 1948, my father, a fervent New York Giant fan, and my uncle took me to my first visit to the Polo Grounds. And it was magic to me. It was just amazing to see the Polo Grounds. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about how this essay came about. This is basically what I'm talking about is an essay that appeared in this book, Five Tools, okay? Willie Mays' Five Tools that SABR produced a few years ago. Bill Nolan, who organizes quite a few of these books, sent out a list of topics, and he said, anybody want to write on them? And I responded, I said, Bill, this is heavily to San Francisco. What about his days in New York? There were a few articles, but nothing about those magical 5 years in New York City playing at the Polo Grounds. And I said, well, how about if I wrote an article, Willie Mays at the Polo Grounds? And Bill said, go for it. All right, to give you a little idea of the gist of my talk, let me just kind of read to you the first paragraph in this essay. Certain ballparks complement the strengths of specific players. Yankee Stadium, which opened in 1923, was termed the house that Ruth built. One reason for such a slogan was the short distance to the right field stands, which seemed to cater to the powerful left-handed stroke of Babe Ruth. While the benefits of Babe Ruth playing in Yankee Stadium were immediate, it took many years for a player to take advantage of the vast center field at the Polo Grounds. That player was Willie Mays. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes is not just Willie Mays, but also the Polo Grounds. Let me give you a little history of the Polo Grounds. There's been a Polo Grounds in New York City from 1876 to 1963. The first Polo Grounds was at Fifth Avenue and 110th Street, and it was used for polo. But in 1880, Jim Nutri, who played for a Brooklyn team in the National League, got together with John Day, and they decided Manhattan should have a baseball team. And they created the New York Metropolitans. And they played at the Polo Grounds, the first Polo Grounds, from 1880 to 1882. And they were just an exhibition team. They didn't join any league, but they did play some of the teams in the National League, the American Association, but they also played college teams and semi-pro teams. And then in 1883, the New York Metropolitans joined the American Association. And there were two franchises that went defunct in the National League, and one was the Troy franchise. And they brought that Troy franchise down to New York City and christened them the New Yorkers, but they soon became known as the New York Giants. And from 1883 to 1889, they played in Polo Grounds 1, 110th Street and 5th. They actually played with the Metropolitans, but the Metropolitans folded after a few years. In 1889, the city of New York decided to build 111th Street right across this Polo Grounds 1. So that meant they had to find a new stadium or a new ballpark for the Giants to play. They actually played a few games in Jersey City and also in Staten Island, but then they found a place up in Manhattan, Coogan's Bluff. And the Giants moved up there. Now, they only bought half of the property, and that was a mistake because another league was formed, the Brotherhood League, really formed by players, and they played at the other half of Coogan's Bluff or not Coogan's Bluff, but the field at the bottom of Coogan's Bluff. And they were the team in the Brotherhood League. Now, that Brotherhood League folded after 1 year. So this place where the Giants played in 1890, that was Polo Grounds too. But when the Giants, when the Brotherhood League folded, the Giants decided that it would be much better to play in that field where the Brotherhood League was playing. So they moved to the field, the Brotherhood League, and that became Polo Grounds 3. And they decided that what they needed was more stands. And so the left field and right field was 335 feet. But they built stands there, moving the left field seat distance down the foul line to 279 and right field to 257. And no one really worried about that at that time because obviously this was a dead ball era. No one hit home runs during this period of time. So the Giants played there from 1890 to 1911. And unfortunately, in 1911, right at the beginning of the season, the Polo Grounds, this wooden structure, burned down. Now, this is kind of an amazing situation. Here is a stadium that's burned to the ground in like April or May of 1911. The Giants built a concrete and metal stadium, steel stadium, and actually played baseball at the end of the 1911 season in that new stadium, and that became Polo Grounds 4. Now, they retained the short left field and the short right field, and of course, then they had this cavernous center field. So you had short right field, short left field, and a cavernous center field. And that was not any real problem until 1919. Because now Babe Ruth became a member of the Yankees. And guess where the Yankees were playing? Since 1913, they've been playing at the Polo Grounds. And Ruth goes and hits 59 home runs in 1920. And the Yankees start outdrawing the Giants, which really causes great problems with John McGraw and Charles Stoneham, who is now the owner of the Giants. And they decide the Yankees we don't want the Yankees playing the Polo Grounds anymore. So they basically kicked the Yankees out. And of course, the Yankees built Yankee Stadium to play in 1923. 1921 and 1922, the Giants win the pennant in the National League, and the Yankees win the pennant in the American League. Giants win both World Series, but the Yankees turned the tables in 1923. But from this period on, all the way until the late 1940s, the Giants are a second team in New York City because the Yankees are outdrawing them every year. And of course, then the Dodgers emerge in the 1940s. And so now let's just kind of touch on what happens in the late 1940s. The Giants, again, as I said, are kind of the third team in New York City. And this is bugging Charles Stoneham's son, who's Horace Stoneham, who's now the owner. And Horace decides he's got to have a change of management. He's got Mel Ott as the manager of Giants, and Mel was an all-time Giant favorite. And he decides that he's going to sit down with Branch Rickey, the owner of the Dodgers. The Dodgers actually have two managers. They have Bert Shotton, who led the team to the pennant in 1947, and the current manager is Leo DeRocha. And DeRocha was banned from baseball in 47 for consorting with gamblers, but he's back in 1948 and is managing the Dodgers. They're not doing that great in 1948. But Stoneham meets with Rickey, and this has a big impact on Willie Mays later. And we're not quite sure what Stoneham's intent was, but we know what Rickey's intent was. He wants to get rid of DeRocha. So in an amazing twist of fate, one day, Leo DeRocha is managing the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the next day he's managing their hated rivals from across town, the New York Giants, as Stoneham hires DeRocha to be the manager. And DeRosa then, over the next few years, transitioned the Giants from the slow-footed, home run-happy home team in 1947. They had led the league in home runs in 1947, 221. Actually, it was a major league record at that time. Okay, so that's taking us to the late 1940s. And while all of this is going on, there was a young man down in Birmingham, Alabama, Fairfield, Alabama, who's a great, in high school, is an all-state basketball and football player. He's not a baseball player because his high school doesn't have baseball. But Willie Mays, is playing for the Birmingham Black Barons along with his son, along with his father, because that is his really first love, baseball. So he's playing with the Black Barons, and of course the color barrier is now broken, and so there are some teams that show some interest in Mays. Now, of course, one team that should have had a significant interest in Mays is the Boston Red Sox, and the reason for that is the Black Barons are playing in Rickwood Field, but also the Barons are playing in Rickwood Field. So they were a Red Sox farm team. But, we know historically the Red Sox and Tom Yorkie were not ready to sign a black ball player in 1948 or 1949. Then supposedly the Braves show some interest, but nothing materializes. But Roy Campanella is playing with a barnstorming team in Birmingham, and he sees Mays in action. And so he lets the Dodgers know that Willie Mays is really star attraction down there. And they send a scout, Whit Matthews, down to Birmingham. And Whit says, no, Mays doesn't hit the curveball. So they passed. Thank God. I'm a Giant fan, so thank God they passed on Willie Mays. And then next thing you know, the Giants send Ed Montague down there, and he says, you got to sign Mays. So Mays gets signed to a Giant contract. And right after high school in 1950, he graduates from high school. His father says he's not going to play professional baseball until he graduates from high school. And so Mays becomes signs with the Giants and graduates from high school, and the next day is playing for the Trenton team in the minor leagues, a Giant farm team, and they're playing up in Hagerstown. And of course, this Willie then gets exposed to the racist attitudes in Hagerstown, and that's a whole story for another presentation. But Willie does extremely well at Trenton and gets invited to spring training for the 1951 season. Now, we get to 1951, and DeRosa has kind of transformed the Giants. They've got now Eddie Stanky and Alvin Dark, Bobby Thompson, center field, Whitey Lockman, Monty Irvin. He's trying to transform the Giants from that slow-footed power team in 1947. And he sees Mays, and he knows he's got this cavernous center field in the Polo Grounds, and he says, that's my center field. So he tries to convince Horace Stoneham to allow Mays to play right from the beginning of the 1951 season. But Stoneham says, no, we got to get him more seasoning. And so he goes out and plays for Minneapolis in AAA baseball. And for a month or so, just electrifies Minneapolis, bats a .477. And he can't be kept down any longer. So he comes up to the Giants in May of 1951. And first series is against the Philadelphia Phillies at Shibe Park in Philadelphia. And Mays goes 0 for 12. 3 games, go 0 for each of those 3 games. They come back to the Polo Grounds, and their first game is against the Boston Braves. And the Braves are pitching Hall of Fame pitcher. And the pitcher the left-handed pitchers won more games than any other lefty in National League history, and that's Warren Spahn. And Mays hits a home run in his first at-bat off Spahn over the left field roof in the Polo Grounds. So it seems that maybe Willie has turned the corner, but he doesn't. That's the only hit he gets in that whole series. And then Pittsburgh comes into the Polo Grounds, and again Mays goes and has an over. And he retreats to the clubhouse and is found crying in the clubhouse by two giant coaches, Freddie Fitzsimmons and Herman Franks. And they say we better get Leo in here to talk to Willie. So Leo comes in and talks to Leo. Leo comes in and talks to Willie. And Willie says, Leo, you got to send me down a minus. This National League is just too much for me. And Leo looks at him and says, listen, as long as I am the manager of the New York Giants, you're going to be playing center field. And I have some tips for you. First, you got to start hitting to right field. You can't be trying to pull every ball. Secondly, your socks, your leggings are too long. You got to pull them up. They're calling some low strikes on you. And finally, Willie, I want you to really patrol not just center field, but right center field and left center field. Anything you can catch out there, I want you to get. Willie seems to draw some comfort in this and actually turns this season around and starts performing quite well. Now we get to mid-August, and the Giants are playing the Dodgers, and this is probably the most electrifying play in that first year that Willie has. And I'm going to read to you what is written about that play from my essay in 5 Tools. Runners on first and third. Frillo hits a fly ball to right center field. Joseph Sheen of the New York Times had the following description of what happened next. It looked pretty deep enough to bring in Cox, especially since Mays had to run a long way to get to the ball. But Willie, making a complete whirling pivot on the dead run, cut loose with a tremendous peg that boomed into Wes Westrum's mitt in perfect position for the catcher to tag the sliding Cox. Eddie Brannick, the Giants' road secretary since 1922, quite a bit of time, since now we're talking about 1951. I've seen Speaker, DiMaggio, Terry Moore, all of them, but I've never seen anything like that throw. The kid made the greatest throw I ever looked at. Both the Dodgers and Giants players were in disbelief. Everyone thought the Dodgers were going to take the lead. The bottom of the inning, as so often happens, Mays comes up, gets a hit. Wes Westrum hits a home run. The Giants win that game 3-1, I believe. Now, did that play propel the Giants? During that August stretch, they won 16 in a row. They're 13 and a half to begin that streak behind the Dodgers. And of course, the last week of the season, they catch the Dodgers. Both teams do well in the final weekend of the season, and they have the playoff. And of course, Bobby Thompson and the home hit that around the world wins the pennant for the Giants with Mays on deck. And then Willie ends up playing in his first World Series. He didn't do anything else spectacular in that World Series, and the Giants lose 4-2 to the New York Yankees. Now, the Korean War is going on, and given there's a draft, and Willie, a young man, gets subject to the draft. He tries to point out that he's the sole breadwinner for his family down in Birmingham. But unfortunately for him, he gets drafted and he ends up in the Army in 1950, after the first month of the season in 1952. What is the Army like for Willie? It's like an extended spring training. He plays a lot of baseball in the Army. And he perfects his basket catch while in the Army. And he actually grows a bit and gets a little stronger. And he comes back in 1954. And as the season moves on, he basically is hitting a lot of home runs. And again, DeRocher talks to him about saying, hey, Willie, maybe you should hit more to right field. And you might win the batting title. Well, lo and behold, the last day of the season, Willie Mays Duke Snyder from the Dodgers and Don Mueller, Mays' teammate, are neck and neck for the batting title. Mays gets a couple hits the last day, wins the batting title with a 345 batting average. And now we go to the World Series. And of course, we've got the first game of the World Series. Now, one of the things I was curious about is why did they play the World Series in the Giants? The Indians had won 111 games. Giants had won some in the 90s, and they played the first two games at the Polo Grounds at Giants Park. And I think Pat Brown is on this call, and he let me know that in those days, basically, the even years, the National League had the first two games. In the odd years, the American League had the first two games. So the Giants ended up with the first two games in the Polo, which is a big advantage, as it turns out. And of course, then the game goes on, and Magley against Bob Lemon, and we get to the eighth inning. And there's two men on. I think it's Al Rosen on first and Larry Doby on second. Vic Wirtz, who's had a couple of hits already at the plate, and Magley is pitching, but then DeRocha decides that maybe we need a left-handed pitcher pitch against a left-handed hitting Vic Wirtz. They even did that back in 1954. Okay, so he brings in Don Little, and Little throws up one of his offerings, and Wirtz hits a screaming long line drive to deep center field. And now I'm going to read to you what Willie's own words are about the famous catch that he makes. When Wirtz hit the ball, I never doubted I would catch it. I was thinking I needed to get the ball back to the infield to prevent Cleveland from taking the lead. That's all I was thinking. I scored from second on fly balls like that. Easy. Doby was a very aggressive runner. He might be trying to tag and advance two bases. They told me he was halfway home and had to come back to second to tag up. I needed to keep him from scoring. The ball was hit, and I ran toward the wall, knowing I'm making the catch and thinking about how to get the ball back. I stopped in front of the wall, made a quick U-turn. It was simple to me. You go back, you catch the ball, you spin, you turn, you throw it back to the infield. I don't like to exaggerate, but I was young and cocky enough to know I could catch any ball in that park. But the important thing was for the runners to stay on the bases. Doby only got one base, and Rosen went back to first. Of course, that catch has now become probably one of the most outstanding fielding plays in the history of World Series. And once again, maybe that propelled the Giants, because in the bottom of the 10th inning, Dusty Rhodes hits a home run. The Giants win 5-2. They win the next day 3-1. They go to Cleveland and continue their winning streak by winning games 3 and 4, and they sweep. They sweep this American League team that won 111 games, that had a pitching staff of Bob Lemon, early win, Mike Garcia, Bob Feller, Art Huderman, with a great bullpen in Don Morrissey and Ray Naleski. Truly a significant upset in the history of the World Series baseball. So now we go to 1955, and Giants don't do as well. And there are rumors now. There are rumors that maybe the Giants and the Dodgers will be leaving New York. O'Malley is stoking those rumors in New York because he wants in Brooklyn because he wants a new ballpark. Willie still performs well in 1955. He hits 51 home runs. I believe that's right. 51 home runs. And at the end of the season, Leo comes up to Willie and says, Willie, this is going to be my last year as manager of the Giants. And Willie goes, Leo, how am I going to survive? And Leo says, you'll do just fine. In 1956, Bill Rigney becomes the manager of the Giants. And there's no doubt that Willie Mays, that Leo DeRocha, Leo had, in fact, I believe I heard Bobby Thompson say this once. Leo basically knew how to treat each individual player and knew which ones to to really bust their chops, and others to basically needed to have a word of encouragement. In fact, I believe in New York Preservation Society, there was a presentation about a second baseman, Davy Williams, and for some reason or other, Leo really felt Davy had to be prodded all the time, and they actually almost came to blows on one or two occasions. But really, is by many think that Leo is coddled, but Doc Ridney's not going to have any part of that. And in fact, early in the season, he actually rebukes Willie for a play. So there's tension between Willie and Doc. Excuse me, I keep saying Doc. I mean Bill Rigney. Doc comes later. And there's tension between Alan Doc and Bill and Willie Mays then too. Okay, so let me just kind of digress. As I told you, I have some Jersey City. The Brooklyn Dodgers are trying to put pressure on Robert Moses, Robert Wagner, and I believe it's John Cashman, who's the borough president of Brooklyn, for this new ballpark at where the Barclays Center is now. And he wants Moses to condemn that property and then have a ballpark built. But Moses is having he won't do that. He feels he's not a big fan of spectator sports. He likes parks and highways. And of course, Robert Caro's biography, The Power Broker, sums up Moses. Well, it doesn't sum up, it's over 1,100 pages. So O'Malley has a contract written with the Jersey City to play 7 games in Jersey City against each National League team in 1956, 1957, and an option for 1958. So the Dodgers are going to play in Jersey City. Now, Jersey City is not a Dodger. There aren't that many fans rooting for the Dodgers in Jersey City. You have a large Yankee following, and because of the Jersey City Giants, or the farm team of the New York Giants, you still have a lot of New York Giant fans in Jersey City. So the Dodger players aren't exactly happy to play there. But on August 15th, it's the time for the Giants to play, and it's a sellout crowd. And it's Don Newcomb for the Dodgers against Johnny Antonelli for the Giants. And in the 4th inning, Willie Mays hits a home run off of Newcomb. And Antonelli pitches probably the greatest game of his life. He shuts out the Dodgers, beats them 1-0, 14 strikeouts, only 2 hits. And so the Giants win that game 1-0. Now, years later, I'm a Giants fan, and I'm in this New York Giant Preservation Society, and the Giants are bringing the World Series trophy, their World Series trophy from 2010, to New York for breakfast. And the whole New York Giant Preservation Society is invited to a breakfast. The Giants are hosting it in one of the hotels in New York City. And at the end of the breakfast, the Giants give out James Hirsch's biography of Willie Mays. And and each of us goes up and gets Willie to sign it. And I get up there and I says, Willie, you hit 660 home runs, but the one I remember the most is the one you hit in Jersey City. Mays didn't even look up, and he just said, off of Don Newcomb. I found that kind of interesting. I wonder if he remembered every pitcher for every home run. Well, anyway, let's go back to 1957. The Giants again beat the Dodgers in Jersey City. But 1957 represents the end of both the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants in New York. Early in the 57 season, the Giants decide to move to San Francisco. And many think the Dodgers went first, but no, the Giants actually moved to the West Coast first, or decided to move to the West Coast first. And they voted, their board of directors voted 7-1. The only negative vote about the Giants move was by Joan Payson, who was on their board, who later became the owner of the New York Mets. But anyway, the Giants and the Dodgers, if Dodgers eventually, actually when the season's in, finally commit to going to Los Angeles because there's some issues with the squatters at Chavez Ravine. In the last game in the Polo Grounds, Willie is playing, and again, he goes all out. He goes all out all the time. But even in that last game, he goes all out, beats out a ground ball in the seventh inning. But the Giants lose 9-0. And for the last time, Willie Mays hears a song that played at the end of every Giants games. We're calling all fans, all those New York Giants fans. And that's the end of Willie's career in Polo Grounds as a New York Giant. Of course, in 1962 and 1963, Willie comes back to the Polo Grounds to play against the Mets. And I'll just read a comment that appeared Mays' return to the Polo Grounds in 1962. Arthur Daly wrote, "The center field turf at the Polo Grounds looked normal this weekend for the first time in 5 years. Willie has come home." Mays did not disappoint as he hit 3 home runs in the 4-game sweep. Giants swept the Mets. So to conclude my presentation, I'll talk a little. I'll just mention a quote by Donald Honig, who wrote, "Putting Mays in a small ballpark would have been like trimming a masterpiece to fit a frame." Willie exploited the cavernous center field at the Polo Grounds. Polo Grounds was built for Willie Mays. Thank you very much. Questions or comments?
What do you guys got for John? Anything?
Hurrah.
Tom?
My dad is about 3 years older than John, and he would have enjoyed if he was up for this presentation, because he went to the Polo Grounds in 1949.
Yeah, a difficult time hearing. I don't know whether it's my computer or what. Peter, I can hear you. Can you repeat the question?
He just made a comment that his dad is a couple years older than you, and he would have enjoyed this presentation if he was up for it.
Okay.
I just wonder when the Giants did move, what was your personal feeling? Did you ever have any anger about it? I know you went and were still a fan of the San Francisco Giants.
What were my personal feelings?
Yeah.
Well, when they moved,
Yeah.
oh, devastated. I mean, I remember walking home from school when the whole thing happened, and I nearly wasn't even crying. I went to the Polo Grounds a lot in the 50s to see the Giants play and see Willie play in center field. And one of the things I kind of talk a little bit about is I love the fact that we were sitting in the right field lower stands, and there'd always be a debate. Well, not always, but sometimes there'd be a debate who's the best center fielder in New York. You had Mantle in the Yankees, Duke Snider at the Dodgers, and Willie in center field. And it was always kind of interesting to hear that. In fact, my mother, these were Sunday gatherings, Sunday trips we'd have. My brother, myself, my mother, and my father would go over to Polo Grounds to see a doubleheader for $1.25. You know, those were the days. Okay. And it was really great to be over there. It was a long trek, though, because from Jersey City to Polo Grounds, it took us about a little over an hour, or at least over an hour, maybe a bus ride, 2 or 3 subway rides to get to the Polo Grounds. But it was well worth it. We just had wonderful Sunday gatherings at the Polo Grounds. It's still, to me, the ballpark that resonates the best with me.
But you didn't have any hesitation to continue rooting for the San Francisco Giants?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Did you have any hesitation to continue to root for the San Francisco Giants?
I didn't quite get that.
I'm sorry. Did you have any hesitation to continue rooting for the San Francisco Giants?
No, because of Mays. I mean, how could you do, that was, I think, the difference between Dodger fans and Giant. Well, first, the Dodger fans felt like O'Malley cheated them out of, because the Dodgers were still a somewhat viable franchise when they moved to LA. And so they were angry at O'Malley and angry at the Dodger ownership. So that's why a lot of the Dodger fans stopped rooting for the Dodgers and became Mets fans. But the Giants fans, and it's evident by this group that's in New York, the New York Giant Preservation Society, there are a lot of Giant people from around that period of time who still rooted for the Giants. And we had a thing about Willie Mays. Of course, he passed this year, but we had it earlier in the year. And you can see that there were so many of us who basically continued rooting for the Giants because of Willie Mays.
I know when the Colts left, I hated the Indianapolis Colts. I was a big Baltimore Colt fan, but I hate the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. Anything else?
Good job, John. You look good. Hope you're feeling good.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
All right,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. I'll see you all soon. If you have any questions, reach out to me. And enjoy the summer weather while it's still here.
Oh, Pete, can I ask you something? There is no speaker series on Saturday, right?
Correct. It got canceled because he had surgery.
Right. I just wanted
So there is a virtual one next to fill its spot. A virtual one that's free for SABR members. That's Robert Fitz is going to do about the bonsai Babe Ruth.
Yeah, I did get that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to send it around again for people who didn't get it, but that's next.
The 13th, I believe.
Yes, next Wednesday.
Okay.
All right.
Very
Sounds
good.
everybody. Much appreciated. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you guys all next time around.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.